Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. We talk about the problems people face in their day-to-day lives. Let's start with the video. During the pandemic, my father-in-law's company shut up, which caused them to lose their house and suffer greatly with their finances. My in-laws were extremely rich, so when this became news, we all were greatly shocked, and understandably so. This took a toll on my mother-in-law and father-in-law. My father-in-law owned a company that was a major supplier in the town we lived in. Until a couple of years back, due to extreme competition, the company had started suffering a great loss. This loss had gotten worse by the time the virus rolled around, and eventually they had to shut down the company. This understandably devastated my father-in-law, as he had spent years working on this company and had spent all his blood, sweat, and tears to build it where it was. My mother-in-law had also been shaken up by this loss, as she was a stay-at-home wife her entire life. Well, their condition wasn't too bad, but my father-in-law would definitely need to start all over again, and as you all know, business comes with its own risks. Well, they could not do much as the virus had been going on. For the time being, they decided that they needed to downsize so as to cut back on their budget, but it was obvious that my in-laws were not in the condition to take care of themselves. For some more context, my in-laws have paid some of the mortgage off of their house. Now that I think back at it, I know I shouldn't have let them do so. But being young, dumb, and stupid, I thought it was a good idea, as they did not want their names on the title of the house, and honestly, 24-year-old me did not really know much about obligation and entitlement. So when my in-laws decided they wanted to downsize but did not want to move into a completely new home for the time being, my husband decided the best thing to do is to invite them to live with us without bothering to even ask me. Of course, I wouldn't say no, even if mother-in-law and I don't get along the best, but I know I wouldn't be cruel enough to just not help them during their tough times. But still, I tell my husband that I would have liked it if he would have talked to me about this, and for some reason, blows up at me, calling me entitled, evil, and selfish. I should have taken this as a hint and gotten out of the house at that moment. But I guess I was trying to come up with any possible excuses to allow his behavior. Well, my in-laws moved in, and for the first couple of months, everything seems to be going pretty well. Mother-in-law is extremely helpful around the house, and father-in-law also seemed enthusiastic to reopen his business eventually. Things were going so well, in fact, that I even apologized to my husband for not understanding his perspective. Well, it's been about 6 months since my in-laws moved in with us. All is good until the day my mother-in-law finds this out about my son. You see, we had banned anything that had nuts in it, and it was pretty easy to do so because we did not really use nuts in our food anyways. This was all until my mother-in-law started raving about her walnut brownies, how she loves them, and how it's been so long since she's made a batch. Hearing this makes my father-in-law and husband brighten up, as they have had extremely sweet memories behind my mother-in-law's brownies. It's like a family recipe. I admit she makes some of the most delicious brownies. So we get her the required items needed to bake them, and she gets to work. We're all quite excited, especially my son, 6, who hasn't had the chance to have them. I tell my mother-in-law specifically about my son's allergies and request her to bake a separate batch of brownies for my son. Her reaction surprises me, as she says that I'm just overreacting and that I needed to let my son grow out of it. Well, I know I wasn't going to let my mother-in-law have it, and we have a little back and forth because I told her that I'm not going to let her teach me how to parent my son. I think my reaction shocked her, and she passive-aggressively tells me that she will make a separate batch for him, and I think that is it. Oh boy, I was so wrong. My mother-in-law bakes her special brownies, and as my husband and I are busy with work, my father-in-law and son are the first ones to dig in. My son raves about how good they are and has a couple of pieces of them. I think nothing of it as I try to finish my work so that I can enjoy the treat as soon as possible. Well, once I'm done with the work, I do not get the treat, but get greeted by the view of my son lying down unconscious on the floor. I am shocked, scared, and crying instantly as I scream for my husband. My husband rushes into the living room, and my mother-in-law and father-in-law follow him. I frantically tell my husband to drive me and my son to the hospital. and ask mother-in-law and father-in-law if they have any idea as to what might have happened to my son. My mother-in-law turns white as a ghost and swears up and down that she was absolutely no idea. This makes me suspicious instantly, but I decide to ignore it because I know I first need to look out for my son. My husband and I drive my son to the hospital where he is instantly taken to emergency room. The doctors inform us, although the case is pretty severe, but that there is not much to worry about. All they tell me is that they have found a lot of my son's allergens in his system, and if we were even a little late to drive him here, he would have needed to be hospitalized for weeks. As soon as I hear this, I see red. I told my husband exactly what went down between mother-in-law and I before she baked the brownies. I tried to get my husband to realize what happened, and he literally cannot wrap his head around this. He instead gets angry at me for trying to blame mother-in-law for my son's carelessness. I tell my husband there is no way that my son would be careless, as I knew for a fact that my mother-in-law served the brownies to my son as they were too warm for him to be taken by himself. My husband gets angrier as I try to prove it to him and tells me that he cannot believe that I can stoop so low that I would blame his mother for getting back at him, for letting them move in. I knew I had enough and needed to protect my son from someone as evil as my mother-in-law. So I packed my bags and asked my mom if I could move in with her for a couple of weeks, and thankfully she says yes. I drive myself to her house and explain the situation to her once I get there. Although she seems disgusted by my husband's reaction, she tells me that I shouldn't have argued with my husband over my mother-in-law's mistakes. This is where I feel conflicted and would appreciate your advice. AITA for blowing up at my husband because his mom put my son's life at risk to see if he could grow out of his allergies. My son will be discharged from the hospital after a couple of days now, and I have decided not to return to my house, but instead go back to my mom's house. This is due to the fact that my husband still believes that everything that happened was my son's fault, and blatantly refuses to even listen to my son. My phone has been blasting with messages from my sister-in-law, brother-in-law, and other relatives blaming me for wanting to put my poor in-laws on the street because apparently I cannot stand them staying with me, which is funny, because none of these relatives ever tried to move my in-laws in their house. I'm not really sure what I'm going to do from here. I really do not want to divorce my husband over this, but seeing his bias towards his parents makes me look at him in a completely different light. Marriage counseling is definitely something I'm going to look into, but only if my husband is willing to put in as much effort as I am, which by his reaction, I doubt he will. My husband's reaction is truly saddening, and it breaks my heart to see my son keep repeating that he really did not take the brownies by himself, as he's heard the conversation between my husband and I multiple times. Hi, everyone. It's been about 2 weeks since I've been living with my mother, and my son lives with me as well. I received a call from my husband today, and he sounded like he was on the verge of tears as he apologized to me for everything he had done. I do not respond to him, as I'm not sure what to say, and just continue hearing him out. He starts explaining to me how the other day he came home earlier from work, passed by my mother-in-law's room where he heard her talking about my son to his sister. That's when he decided to stand by the door of her room, which was slightly open, to hear what she was talking about, and that is when he heard it all. My mother-in-law confessed to my sister-in-law that the brownies she made contained walnuts. Even the separate ones she made for my son had powdered walnuts in them. Hearing this gave me a sense of satisfaction, as now I felt like I wasn't just being crazy. My husband informed me that his parents will be moving into my sister-in-law's house soon, and that he cannot wait to make it up to me once I get back home. This is where I feel conflicted and bring up wanting to get marriage counseling. I'm not sure why, but he got pretty irritated at my suggestion and told me that there's no need for it, as we have already sorted out this matter. I tell him that I will not be moving in with him if he refuses to do the bare minimum, and he hung up on me. This shocks me, as I'm starting to feel like my husband has changed completely, and honestly, for the worse. This is not what my son deserves. But honestly, I should have seen this coming, as a lot of you had already pointed it out. I think I'm going to see a lawyer first, and also enroll myself and my son into therapy before starting the divorce procedure. It is heartbreaking how much my husband changed, and how much he is not ready to make any adjustments for us, which makes me feel like I would rather be without a husband than be with someone who doesn't care about the well-being of his family. Thank you all for your advice. It really helped me open my eyes. NTA, your mother-in-law is crazy and should be thankful that you did not call the cops on her yet. You really need to reconsider your marriage if this is how your husband decides to react when it's clear that it is your mother-in-law that fed him the brownies. Please protect your son from these people. NTA, but you will be if you do not leave your husband and protect your son. If you give in now, your mother-in-law will take it as a yes and will continue to endanger your child, treating him as some experiment to prove her stupid theory. I would say even go as far as to file a missing report against her OP for future purposes. 3 months ago, my wife and I had our baby. As they often are, her delivery got a little messy. From the day we found out she was pregnant, she decided she wanted to do a natural birth. She told me she wanted a vaginal birth. No epidural, no sedatives, no pain meds. She wanted to bring our baby into the world feeling everything. I was, of course, really worried about this, as, from what I've heard, childbirth can be painful. I was especially worried about if she needed an episiotomy and was not sedated during it. She, however, assured me she could handle it. So 9 months go by and she's ready to pop. When we get to the hospital, I do my best to advocate for her and make sure her wants were heard. However, we got right up to the wire before my wife said she needed an epidural. They took care of that, and when she's pushing our daughter's giant head, won't fit through my wife's vagina. So she gets an emergency episiotomy and brings our daughter into the world. Now, 3 months later, we're allowing non-family to meet our daughter. My wife invited over her girlfriends, and since they're officially all moms, they started talking about their birth stories. I heard some horrific things, and then we got to my wife. All she said was that she had an easy birth, no sedatives, no surgeries, just a few hours of pushing and done. The lie was confusing to me. I was trying to think of why she'd say this. I asked her if she's sure about that because I don't remember it happening that way. She tells me that she's the one that shot a person out of her. I suggest that maybe the pain and baby hormones are scrambling about how that happened. I tell the real story and say that she got an epidural and episiotomy. This led to the other ladies making jokes and giggling about my wife's mistelling. There were many jokes at her expense, despite her not even having the worst birth story. For the rest of the visit, I could tell there was something brewing behind her eyes. When they left, my wife said I embarrassed her. She said there was no reason for me to tell them what happened. I said there was no reason to lie. She completely disagreed and said that I won't get it. This, ESH, the competition for the perfect natural birth is really damaging to women and leads to a general sense of shame, failure, when having a healthy baby is a major accomplishment, full stop. That said, mean to out her publicly. 100% agree. I think it's women like OP's wife that put pressure on other women to not seek help because they think whoever suffers more is the best mother. It's toxic AF. As long as your baby is alive and well, why does it matter how much harder you could have intentionally made the process for yourself? I'm a 27-year-old female, and I'm an only child. I left the UK for work 5 years ago, and in that time my dad's sister, daughter, has gotten close to my parents. I have no relationship with her. I FaceTimed my parents yesterday to tell them that I am pregnant, 12 weeks, after being given the all clear by my doctor. I expected them to have an emotional reaction as they have been loudly expressing the facts they want a grandchild for years, and they are, in general, pretty emotional people. They did not seem pleased, but they both started grinning at each other and then turned and told me that my cousin, H, 21, female, is also pregnant. I admit my face dropped because they didn't even say congratulations before mentioning someone else's pregnancy. I tried to be positive and say how nice that was, and that both mom and dad started talking about how many weeks she is, 6, and how she's having nausea and how excited she is for a baby and how they can't wait to meet her baby. They did say it would be nice that our kids would be the same age, but it felt tagged on and insincere. My dad rang back in the evening, ostensibly to thank me for the flowers I had delivered to them, except he started getting angry with me and saying that both my parents had seen my face fall when they shared H's news, and that I was raised better than to be self-centered. He said that just I was sharing good news of my baby. They wanted to share the good news of H's baby. The thing is, they didn't even ask how I'm feeling or how long ago I found out, or indeed anything except the due date to compare it to H's. I didn't think I was an AH, as I'm very close to my parents, and I thought this was a big deal. But after my dad read me the Riot Act, I'm no longer so sure. AITA? NTA. It's not self-centered to want your own parents to show a tiny bit of excitement over you telling them you're pregnant. You're not mad that they mentioned your cousin's pregnancy. You're hurt that they basically ignored your own. You are allowed to have needs and feelings, even if your parents have raised you to believe that it's selfish, which it's not. I think you should tell them as well how they didn't seem that excited that their child is pregnant and couldn't take 2 minutes to ask you about how you were, etc., etc. It's understandable that you wanted them to show as much excitement towards you as they did towards your cousin. NTA, I'm petty and would have thanked them for congratulating me, then tacked on, "Oh, wait, you didn't. And I'm doing fine, thanks for asking. Oh, wait, you didn't do that either." Your parents suck. Send them a message outlining that you are disappointed in them for not taking an interest in how you were. Tell them they didn't even say congratulations. Tell them they were so busy building up cousin's pregnancy that they forgot to even ask about your well-being or how your pregnancy is. Tell them you wanted to share your good news and they ruined it by making everything about your cousin. Tell them you thought they were raised better and that they failed you in supporting you through this moment. Pregnancy is hard. You might not be doing well, and they don't know since they never